The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious. The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
The back of the winter is broken, and the light lingers long by the door.
Hello, this is Scottish Independence Podcast number 77, and this time the guest is someone I've been trying to get on for a long time. It's folk singer and, you may or may not know, philosophy graduate Karine Polwart, who has been involved in the Yes campaign and has also kindly given us permission to use her tunes, one of which you can hear going on in the background at the moment as well. We actually recorded this a couple of weeks ago, but things have been pretty heavy at work and I haven't actually had the time to get it out until now, so apologies for that, but here it is. I hope you enjoy it. There's certainly a lot in the interview to enjoy, so we'll just go straight to it and have a wee word with you at the end. Hi Karine, how's it going?
It's going very well, thank you. Yes.
I believe you're getting ready for a big bus party tour of going around Scotland with quite a number of interesting people.
Yeah, it's happening in, I think, 10 days' time, the end of next week. We're firing up to Wick and then Stromness. Yeah, it's quite a crew. James Robertson, the writer's going to be there. A whole bunch of folky musician pals, Mary Campbell and Dave Francis and Hamish Moore. Neil Asherson, the historian. It's a motley crew. Billy Kay. And the idea behind it is there was a bus party previously ahead of the 97 referendum on devolution. I think the whole inspiration for it goes way back to Günter Grass and East-West German politics, but the idea behind it is to get out and about, talking about the issues around the referendum. It's not a partisan thing, it's neither yes nor no, nor anything. It's meant to be just about encouraging people to get engaged with the issues and actually for the people on the bus themselves, all of whom are kind of arty types, for once to have us out listening to people rather than talking at people. So it's as much about listening to what people have to say for themselves and what their concerns are as giving anything out to people. And I quite like that as a way of going about things anyway.
Yeah, and it's done with, music and a bit of history and a bit of story and a bit of culture. And that's one of the interesting angles about this, because there's kind of two narratives. There's the official Yes Scotland narrative is very, in a certain sense, technocratic. It's talking about economic situation and, democratic deficits and whatnot. But there's also a kind of cultural angle, which Yes Scotland tend to steer clear of, but maybe some of the more grassroots organisations and things like the bus party itself are sort of picking up the slack on that. Where do you feel is the line here? Should we be talking only in terms of kind of democratic deficit and economic technocratic elements, or should we be focusing more on the culture?
I think we should be focusing on all of that stuff. I mean, I feel that the whole referendum has brought up a lot of stuff around culture, and there's been an enormous number of people involved in the cultural scene, whether they're artists or musicians or writers, or there's a lot of people being very vocal and very excited about the space that this whole thing has opened up to talk about. Yeah, imagining. There's a lot of stuff around imagining possible futures, and if what you do for a living is imagine stuff and make stuff up, that speaks to a quite fundamental part of you. But I think it's also about giving everyone permission to feel that they have a right to imagine what kind of place they want to live in and how they want to be around other people. And imagination and creativity are not things that are owned by people making a living in the cultural sector. So I'm quite excited about the energy there is around all that stuff. And around the strength of organisations like the National Collective. There's a lot of young people getting really engaged in the politics around this as well, and that's very exciting too. So I don't think that the thing's not owned by anybody. I think that's probably the best thing, that I don't feel I'm getting one particular angle, but certainly for me, I try to follow the economic technocratic aspects as best I can, but my interest is perhaps at a deeper level than that. I've become a little bit immune to the particularities of what kind of currency we might use, or whether we'll be a member of the European Union. These are not the things that are influencing my opinion. Not that I think they're irrelevant, but I think there are more fundamental philosophical issues raised by it that are of interest to me a bit more.
Yeah, and none of those things are important, as you say, I think, but none of them are a deal breaker for me on the independence question.
No, they're very much not. I think it's right that they're being raised, and of course they're vital. Any place has to function practically. You've got to be practical and pragmatic, and but actually I think a lot of the debate, I feel a lot of people drawn to the debate who are natural pragmatists. And so, yeah, I'm interested in all of that stuff, but I'm much, much more interested in not just the democratic deficit thing. It's more about a sense of what it is to be part of a democracy and to have agency and responsibility and to feel responsible for the place that you live in and to have trust in other people. I mean, I think there's a massive amount of stuff opened up that's it's not about statistics and facts and political and economic mechanisms. It's around how people engage with each other, how they view each other as people living in the same society. So that's kind of what's of interest to me. So I'm very excited about the bus party. To me, it's not a partisan project. It's about this whole space that's opened up to imagine how things would be, talk about what matters to you, what your values are, and I think that's very exciting. And I felt very excited over the past year. The number of community organised events I've been at, small villages organising series of events for themselves to talk about this stuff in public spaces. That's very exciting, and I hope it's something that doesn't end once the referendum is over. I'd like to think that could be something that would carry on, that we were actually all more engaged in talking publicly about how things work, what we want.
And I noticed that it looks like a pretty deliberate decision to take the bus party to places where, a lot of these events don't normally happen. The two you mentioned there were Wick and Stromness, whereas I'm just thinking, comparing that to David Cameron when he came up, did a speech about protecting the union, then went to have a cabinet meeting in the offices of an oil company. It seems a very different kind of vibe that you're trying to establish there by going to places that other people don't normally reach.
No, I think that's true. I mean, it's going to Falkirk and Glenrothes and Elgin, and most of us live in small places, and I think even within Scotland, one of the main criticisms of the campaign is that for a long time it was very central belt focused. So if I talk to pals from Orkney and Shetland, they've got a lot to say about that from their own very particular geographic perspective. So I think the more those other voices are brought in, the healthier things are. So it was very much not about hitting the big cities and the established venues. We might only be 5.2 million people, but it's a big space to cover and lots of regional and varieties of stuff. And whatever kind of country we make for ourselves moving forward has to take more cognizance of all of that.
All those things make it a different, interesting place. Where everywhere you go, there's a little different thing. That's one of the strengths of the place.
No, absolutely, and I feel that very strongly in terms of my work as a folk musician and all the kind of different regional cultures and dialects and languages, and there's great variety for what's nominally a very small country. And yeah, I mean, for me, one of the things that enthuses me most about this, all the stuff around the referendum, is that it's part of a process. I don't see independence as a goal in itself. I suppose I should be quite clear that I am pro independence, so I am going to be a yes voter come the referendum. But I'm excited about the possibility of that being a starting point for further, devolution of power to local level. I'd like to see us all much more engaged in making decisions at local level.
Because the way that local government is organised in Britain and Scotland is that most people see it as an irrelevance, which is a shame, but in a certain sense they are right.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's or they see it, as an irrelevance and as filled with parochial technocrats, which up to a point perhaps that's true as well. And yet most of us, I think, are quite passionate about the places that we live in, but they're much smaller than the units of governance that we have arranged for ourselves at the moment. I can get quite excited about the village that I live in, and as can many of my neighbours and pals that live here. I live in a community of just under 1,000 people, and I think most of those people, many of them are, and many of them would be willing to give their time to things that were, where they felt a sense of connection to their actual living environment. But me, I live in Midlothian. It's one of the smaller councils, and it still seems far away. Dalkeith is far away. And some of the issues that affect the bigger towns in my area, they're very different issues, even within a small county like Midlothian. So yeah, I'm quite excited about that becoming more meaningful. But the flip side of that is that for it to become more meaningful, we have to take more responsibility. And I think there's a culture of not taking responsibility. We're encouraged not to. So there's going to be work involved in all of this as well. But I'm quite excited about that.
Just come back to the cultural element, and you said you're a Yes supporter. So what do you think an independent Scotland will do for the cultural scene in Scotland? Will it be, do you think it'll have a revitalising effect? It'll breed a new confidence? I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not sure that it works that way. I mean, I'm interested in the fact, I think the strength of the cultural sector is part of the momentum behind this. I don't think the referendum on Scottish independence would have been possible in a place that isn't culturally confident already. I think the strength of the Scottish cultural scene in the widest sense is context for the Scottish independence referendum. So I'm not sure that I'm thinking of it in terms of that independence would revitalise the cultural scene. I actually think we live in an extraordinarily vital place in terms of what's happening culturally. And I mean that in very obvious ways, in terms of, I'm part of a thriving music scene. I think our music scene's amazing and characterised by, cross-fertilisation across genres and collaboration. And we live in a place that makes extraordinary theatre. So I think our cultural scene in terms of what the arts is very, very strong right now. And I don't think that's irrelevant to the fact that we're having these kinds of debates, because I think there is a kind of confidence that sits alongside the independence referendum. But I think it has also galvanised a lot of people in the cultural and arts sector. So the growth of National Collective would be one example of that. And they have much more vocal presence than their numbers would suggest. And lots of artists and musicians have been very outspoken about the referendum.
And most of them on the yes side.
Well, most of them on the yes side, I think that's true. That's not to say that I don't have friends who are undecided and friends who will vote no also. I think it's just that the people who are voting yes in the arts sector have an energy and an excitement about them that makes them want to talk about what they think. Mm-hmm. And it's also I think it's much easier to talk about things if you're someone who makes stuff and imagines stuff for a living, and you're interested in the possibilities of change and transformation, then it's easy to talk about that stuff with enthusiasm. It's harder to talk about preserving what is. So I think there's an excitement about change that maybe is natural for a lot of people working in the arts and cultural sector. I think we need to be careful, and this is part of my interest in being involved in the bus party, that we leave room still for doubt. There's still 4 months to go until the referendum happens. There's still a lot of people who are uncertain about which way they'll vote, who might not vocalise what they think until the day of the referendum itself. So although I'm excited by the energy of it, and I'm also mindful that it's not exclusive and it's not demeaning, and that there's not a careless way of talking about people who think otherwise or who are unsure about what they think, that they're daft. So I think there needs to be great care, and I sometimes don't like the public manner of debate can get a little puerile still, especially if you sit on Twitter for too long, which I tend not to do these days.
It can drive you mad.
It can drive you mad, and it's also it's a tiny number of voices bickering at each other. I have no tolerance for bickering really of any kind whatsoever. So although I feel quite passionate about what I think, I've no desire to. I also know that I have to live in a country after the referendum with people who don't share my views. So in a way, I'm more interested in creating a kind of way of talking about this stuff that can outlast that particular decision, because we have to coexist. And it would be better if we didn't coexist with people that we had completely berated in the process of getting to the decision that we make in September. So, I'm really excited about the possibility of politics happening in a different, more respectful kind of way. And maybe that's idealism, but that's what comes of being a philosophy graduate.
Uh,
I wish there was, I'm excited about the idea of discussion and discourse around this not necessarily being about winning and losing debates. Although, of course, a referendum, there will be a winning and a losing of that referendum. But yeah, we got to live alongside each other. So I'm up for kind of finding better ways of doing that.
I do have a background in political philosophy myself, and I'd have to take a little bit of issue with you there because you're not necessarily an idealist if you study philosophy. You could think of, Sartre and talk about the bleakness of existence if you like, but just apart from that, I'd like to go back maybe a year. And you wrote it's just over a year, and you wrote an article for the Scotsman, and that turned into a kerfuffle with some of that bickering, which you said you don't tolerate, but it seemed to be such a storm in a teacup. You wrote an article which I thought was very good, and it was a very nice line. You were worried about the endlessly reiterated sameness, which I thought was a fantastic line. And you said that scared you. But then the Scotsman put a title on it which suggested you were attacking the SNP, even though you had... I'm sorry, I'm just filling in the listeners with all this.
Yeah.
I know you know this, but the Scotsman changed the title a little bit to say that it was an attack on the SNP, even though you hadn't mentioned the SNP anywhere in the article. How did that sort of make you feel towards the debate? Because then you got caught in this storm of bickering, which has happened to a few people, but I think a lot of the time it's been over-exaggerated when this happened, or did you find it quite a difficult moment?
No, there was a momentary, it was quite a big deal for me to write something for a paper, and it felt quite like I'd never done that before. It felt like quite a responsibility because that the piece that I wrote was part of an 8-week series. There were 4 people writing from the yes perspective and 4 from the no perspective. So I felt very fortunate to have been asked. And yeah, there was a moment, I confess, when I saw the headline of the paper, I was just like, oh, what? There was a bit, and then I got a flurry of stuff. The online social media can be the bane of your life. Where I did get a flurry of indignant Facebook posts and Twitter messages from SNP supporters, kind of going, "What do you mean?" And then I had to kind of go, "Look, I didn't write this, folks. The sub-editors and editors have a role here." I very quickly lost my indignation. With it after a day and being in touch with the editorial staff at the paper, it was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. That's what papers do. These things are set up in such a way that if they can make controversy happen and make people talk, then fine. It's just a tactic. So yeah, I quickly lost my annoyance. And I guess it was a little eye-opener. I don't live in a world of politics. I'm a folk musician. So it gives you a little glimmer of how things are. How much pressure there must be to be a publicly elected representative, actually. How much you must have to mind your words. How easily your words can be twisted. I don't live in a world where people do that. As a general rule, if I get interviewed to talk about my music, people are not looking to catch me out. That's not the point of an interview with a musician or a writer. Mm-hmm. You're not looking to make your interview subject look like an idiot. Yeah. or look in some way duplicitous or whatever. I think if you're a politician, that's probably a large part of what's at play, because that's the way that we think debates have to happen. You have to be constantly trying to catch people out. Like that's your top prize as a political journalist, is to snag somebody on something. And that's just the way things are. I think it's a pity. It means that there is a lack of trying to open up issues in ways that are not, where actually making a mistake would be okay. Yeah. In fact, kind of necessary to finding a better way of doing things. But politicians are not allowed to make mistakes. And so we kind of get the politicians we deserve.
It's interesting you're saying that politicians not allowed to make mistakes. I'm certainly no fan of Gordon Brown, but the only thing he ever said I agreed with, more or less, was that woman was a bigot, and yet that was the one that he got hauled over the coals for. If you, yeah. The media will tend to choose the way they want to run with it and run with it. You could have portrayed that story as Gordon Brown tells bigoted women that she's a bigot, and that's not a big fuss, but that they chose to sort of portray it in that way because maybe, I don't know, it would make a bigger story, they'd sell more papers. They are commercial concerns.
No, of course they are, but they sell the papers to us, so we're the ones that buy the stuff. And they select a dwindling number of people as well. So, I mean, I'm interested as well in what happens next in terms of the kind of media we get. You know, it's the week that the Sunday Herald came out in support of the Yes campaign, but I was quite appalled to read what its readership figures, 24,000 copies?
Yeah.
Holy moly, I mean, that's almost as many, I sell almost as many CDs as that. I mean, I don't like right now, but historically, you know, my first CD has probably sold 24,000 copies. That's kind of terrifying. That what I think of as the main national broadsheet newspaper that I would turn to for an analysis of what's happened in the week is selling as many copies as I might sell.
And this interview will probably reach about 2,000 people. So I mean, it's not.
But I suppose it's about how you reach people and with what impact you reach them. And again, is mass coverage what's at play here? I don't know. I mean, I think more and more people are having to find other ways of engaging, like the fact that your podcast exists and the fact that Wings Over Scotland exists and Bella Caledonia, and do you know what I mean? People are looking elsewhere for an analysis of what's going on, and that's the way it is, and probably healthy as well. But it does vex me slightly in the long run that we're still going to have journalists able to commit to proper investigative stuff moving forward, because actually, if we want, you know, whatever comes of the referendum, and of course I'd like it to be a yes, I'd still like to live in a country where there were people out there willing and able to dig away at untold stories, and have them become newsworthy. So we live in interesting times in terms of how that goes. In terms of the referendum, it's interesting times as well. Is it really the Sunday Herald's? That's certainly not going to be the most pivotal thing and influence in the outcome of the referendum. So what will make a difference? Is it all about the media outlets? How much impact is going to come from small community-based meetings or talking to your neighbour? I don't know.
It's a mix. It's a mix of everything. But to tie in with something we were saying earlier, when we've had Robin McAlpine on from the Reed Foundation a few times, and he was saying that, you know, what you're hoping is that it's creating a new kind of community thing, win or lose in the referendum. And what he thinks is that even if we lose, which I don't think we will, the genie's out the bottle now, and there'd be another referendum within 5-10 years, and we'd win that one because all these groups are going to continue. It's not going to fritter away.
Well, I hope that's true. I mean, the only thing that leaves me slightly vexed is that the last time I had anything near this feeling of energy behind something was all the marching against the Iraq war, which felt like that was unstoppable. Surely it had to make a difference. And then it didn't. And then there was just this kind of dispersal of energy. I really hope that's not how it goes, and that there isn't a fall into despondency. I'm riding on the hope that it will be a yes. I feel the energy is behind that at the moment. But then actually the thing that we need to be mindful of is that there's going to be a lot of people gutted either way. It has brought it, you know, it's the only thing I can think of where people who nominally share the same values and principles in life are divided. You know, so even amongst the people I know who are going to vote no, essentially I share the same moral take on the world as they do. That's vexing. I hope there's not bitterness in how the whole thing pans out. We've got a responsibility this coming last few months to make sure that that's not the case. My fingers are crossed, but I do worry about anything that has this degree of energy and excitement behind it. It's like a super duper losing a cup final. You know, there's going to be weeping one way or another.
Yeah. If we can just come back to the, you know, I talked about the spat and about the article you wrote, but if I could come back to the substance of it, because like I said, I thought it was a great article, and that line, the endlessly reiterated sameness scares me. Could you explain what you meant by that and why it scares you?
I think the thing that I was concerned about then, and to some extent still am, was that the need of the Yes campaign to emphasise what would be the same. So it was really foregrounding continuity. You know, we'll still have the Queen, and we'll still have the pound, and all these things will be the same. And a bit of me was kind of going, well, if they're going to be the same, then what is the motivation there to make a difference? Because making change is a hassle. Like, change is a hassle, and many of us are not predisposed towards lots of change. So I was scared by it. I was scared by it as well because my interests primarily, you know, I come more from a Green perspective. I'm a member of the Green Party. I'm interested in independence as something potentially transformative, not something that emphasises continuity. And that's not to say that there's not continuous aspects, but that's not the thing that is motivating me to think about this and talk about this. So I guess I'd have more in keeping with Robin McAlpine and the whole Commonweal project and the idea that there's a potentially a way to do things differently here. So I get very, very unexcited and a little bit despondent about the degree of conservatism that there was at that point. I think to some extent that's perhaps not quite the leading voice in the campaign. Now I think the campaign is much, much more diverse, and the Commonweal stuff, the green perspective on things, these things have had much more emphasis in the intervening 12 to 15 months than they had at that point. At that point, it was very much seen by many people as purely about the SNP. And I don't think that's the case now. And yeah, the whole cultural movement behind things as well. So I think there are many more diverse voices talking out now. So I feel less scared than I did in January last year.
Excellent. Okay, and the last thing I always ask everyone on the podcast, and it's becoming a problem for me because I've always got to think of a different way to phrase it, but why is it that you decided to support Indy? Was it something that was just clearly obvious to you from a young age? Was there a particular incident? Was there cultural, economic, political reasons, a mix of everything? What was it that made you decide to go for Indy?
I wouldn't have said I'm certainly not a lifelong believer in independence. I don't think that would, in my teens and 20s, Scottish independence wouldn't have been the issue that was fueling my political interest. No, not at all. I mean, certainly all the stuff around devolution and setting up a Scottish Parliament, I got very, very excited about that at that point. But I wasn't necessarily one of those people that saw that as a stepping stone towards independence at that point. And I've never been a member of the SNP, so it's not been necessarily the fuel for my politics. I've always felt very Scottish. That's certainly true, and I think my work in music has given me a depth of interest in Scottish culture and tradition and how that morphs into contemporary stuff as well. But the tipping point towards independence is probably relatively recent. I'm quite pragmatic, I think. Certainly the context of Westminster politics is massive and an alienation from how things work there that's been growing. I mean, it's certainly been grown over 10, 15 years. You
mean you really don't think that a parliament with 70% millionaires is not close to the people? You really don't think they're close to the people and in touch? I'm shocked.
I think that's it though. I mean, I think as I was a natural Labour voter in my 20s, and so I think actually despondency with the Labour Party is a major factor in my shifting towards independence. I'd say that was a big thing. Yeah, and just incredulous at the manner in which Westminster conducts itself often. And I think also because my previous work prior to becoming a musician, I worked for Scottish Women's Aid. And I was involved in lobbying and campaigning around domestic abuse right at the point at which the Scottish Parliament came into being. And I think I've seen real tangible impact of that Parliament in that social sector. The proximity of the people who make decisions that are relevant to an organisation like Women's Aid has made a massive difference to the funding that they're able to attract, to the policy and legislative framework. I think I've also just grown in confidence that a Scottish Parliament could tackle certain things, because I think we've done very well in certain regards and proved our mettle and drawn people into politics with genuine expertise and experience, not professional politicians, but people who have worked in social services and teaching and many other professional backgrounds. And so that's also given me confidence that we would be able to manage our own affairs moving forward. And I think, many things, the banking crisis, there's so many things that would just be tipping points where you go, really? You don't think you could find better people to do that? Give it to me. I'll run your bank. An element of just thinking, no, these people, a lot of what's supposed to pass for expertise and trustworthiness is just spurious. And
deferential.
And proved evidently so over the past 6 or 7 years. So a total lack of trust in people who are supposed to have genuine skill and expertise. Yeah, and a feeling that the Scottish Parliament has proved itself. I'm quite proud of that as an institution, and I don't think it's a massive leap now from our devolved status towards independence in terms of that institution. Where it's a massive leap is in terms of our own heads individually, because if we vote for independence in September, it will no longer be possible to look to Westminster and blame them for all the ills of our society. And in large part, that's what happens right now, is reflexively, it's just all, you can blame those billionaire politicians, those Etonians, those people in the southeast, blah, blah, blah. And there's a long tirade of stuff that we can absolve ourselves of responsibility for how things are. And my view fundamentally on independence is that if we take those powers into our own hands, we can't blame anybody anymore. And actually, that's a little bit terrifying. It's quite convenient in some respects to be able to blame other people for things going wrong. So to do things another way means you have to take responsibility for your own mistakes as well as what might be your own successes. So that's scary, but I'm up for it. And I think we're capable of it.
Okay. Karine, thanks. That's been brilliant. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a million. Cheers. Good luck.
So there you go, that was Karine. I hope you enjoyed that. Now that work's calmed down a bit, I'll be able to get some of the other ones I've recorded recently out fairly sharpish. So there'll be more coming up this week, and just to leave on the usual note, the guest chooses the tune on this show, and this is what Karine chose. So I'll speak to you next time.
Now whistling winds and slaughtering guns bring autumn's pleasant weather. The moorcock springs on quivering wings among the blooming heather. Now waving grain wild o'er the plain delights the weary farmer. The moon shines bright when I rove at night to muse upon my charmer. The partridge loves the fruitful fells, the plover loves the mountains, the woodcock haunts the lonely dells, the soaring hen the fountains. Through lofty groves the cruciate roves, the path of man to shun it, the hazel bush o'erhangs the thrush, the spreading thorn, the linnet. Thus every kind their pleasure find, the savage and the tender. Some social join and leagues combine, some solitary wander. Avaunt away the cruel sway, tyrannic man's dominion, the sportsman's joy, the murdering crime, the fluttering gory pinion. But Peggy dear, the evening's clear, swift flies the skimming swallow, the sky is blue, the fields in view, all fading green and yellow. Come, let us stray our gladsome way and view the charms of nature, the rustling corn, the fruited thorn, and every happy we'll gently walk and sweetly talk till the sun shine clearly. I'll grasp thy waist and fondly pressed swear how I love thee dearly. Not vallowed sham was the burn for hours, not autumn to the farmer, so dear can be as thou to me, my fair, my lovely child.